Good afternoon and thank you, Madam Chairperson. On the 12th of September 2022, a series of clashes erupted between Azerbaijani and Armenian troops on Armenian territory. The violence resulted in nearly 300 deaths and dozens of injuries on both sides over a three-day period. At least 204 Armenian servicemen were killed or missing, while Azerbaijan acknowledged 80 fatalities amongst its forces, bringing the total number killed to at least 284. A ceasefire brokered by Russia on September 13th broke down within minutes, but thankfully a new ceasefire was successfully concluded between the two countries the following day, September 14th, with considerable international assistance. I think it is significant that all of the violence took place on Armenian territory. None of the violence took place in the vicinity of the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh. Furthermore, the violence included strikes against settlements and civilian infrastructure. These have been well documented. They include attacks on the spa town of Jermuk, where numerous residential and tourist locations were hit by shells and other military weapons, including the ropeway, 3 hotels, a sanatorium and a cafe. In Sokt, 200 houses and a municipality building were damaged. In total, according to Armenia Security Council, 36 towns and villages were targeted, including Goris, Sisyan, Kapan, Vardenis, Teg, and Gehamatar. The Armenian government tell us that 4 civilians were killed, 1 more is missing, and 7 wounded. It's significant that Azerbaijan does not deny launching these attacks, but rather has accused Armenia of using civilian and residential structures as firing points, and argued that therefore they were legitimate targets. I do not believe this to be an acceptable response. I also note that Azerbaijan have referenced and blamed large-scale provocations, quote unquote, from the Armenian side. But surely, in this year, above all years, we must all be clear that it is never acceptable for one country to invade the sovereign territory of another. It's also important to note that Azerbaijan continues to occupy parts of Armenian territory as a result of this incursion, and again, this is unacceptable. There have been disturbing reports of possible war crimes being committed by the Azerbaijani armed forces, horrific video evidence of 7 Armenian soldiers being executed, and also desecration of female bodies. I've seen these videos, and they are truly horrendous in their content, and indeed they may constitute evidence of war crimes. I further note that Czech News, the respected fact-checking site, has examined the video and found nothing to indicate that it is a fake. They've also established it was first shared on Azerbaijani Telegram channels, and did significant work to geolocate the site of the video as being in the mountains of Lake Sev, and also confirmed it was very likely made in the time period that would correspond to the outbreak of this conflict. It is also important to note that the Azerbaijan government has said that if the video proves to be genuine, they will seek prosecutions for these actions. I also note correspondence from Azerbaijan stating that they've uncovered evidence of potential war crimes that were committed in the earlier conflict in the 1990s, when parts of Azerbaijani sovereign territory were occupied by Armenia. They referenced the discovery of mass burial sites and evidence of torture and executions. We must never forget that there are still 4,000 Azeris and 1,000 Armenians missing from that earlier conflict. Having witnessed firsthand last year the evidence of the aftermath of occupation by Armenian forces, specifically the destruction of Agdam, rightly described as the Hiroshima of the West, there is no doubt in my mind that these charges too require thorough investigation. Indeed, I think it only fair to reflect that the Council of Europe did not pay enough attention to the whole issue of occupation by Armenian forces of up to 1/5 of Azeri territory for the best part of 3 decades. But again, I have to be clear, these charges, these potential war crimes from this earlier period in no way justify this most recent incursion by Azerbaijan. What makes these events particularly regrettable is that they took place just 2 weeks after a 4th round of EU-mediated high-level talks in Brussels between the two leaders, Azerbaijani President Aliyev and Armenian Prime Minister Pashinyan, where progress was being made. I understand that difficult issues around transportation routes, a possible interstate treaty, and the rights and security of Karabakh Armenians had all been advanced to some degree. Last year, I was rapporteur with regard to the humanitarian consequences of the 44-day conflict that broke out in 2020. I highlighted key issues around the disappeared, deaths from mines, Armenian prisoners of war, and hate speech, all of which remain largely unresolved. Indeed, I note that there are 259 either deaths or serious injuries from mines over the last couple of years. None of these issues will be resolved by war. And I would note the observation of Thomas de Waal that the biggest stumbling block with regard to resolving all these broader issues is the total lack of consequences for whichever side says no to compromise and agreement. I believe that all members of this Parliamentary Assembly must be clear that the use of military force is totally unacceptable in settling disputes between Council of Europe member states. My report called on the Committee of Ministers to pay particular attention to the needs of displaced persons and focus on confidence-building measures for all affected communities and measures necessary to build tolerant societies and tackle hate speech. Regrettably, we seem still very far away from such a scenario. The pressing need now is for both sides to re-engage in peace talks without further delay. We need to see much greater effort from the international community to ensure that this happens. Above all, we cannot have this issue being subject to global political games between superpowers vying for influence and control. I also believe Turkey, which played a significant role in supporting Azerbaijan during the last outbreak of violence in 2020, should adopt a more balanced approach to the wider issues of establishing a just and lasting settlement between these two countries. In this regard, it is welcome news that both Armenia and Azerbaijan have agreed to a civilian EU mission alongside their border. I understand the mission will start by the end of this month and aims to delineate the border between the two countries. The proposed timeline of 2 months seems rather short to me, but the real significance of this decision is that it arose from a meeting involving both Prime Ministers, as well as European President Charles Michel and President Macron. So in conclusion, I hope this mission will act to build confidence and dialogue between both countries. We cannot see any further slide back towards conflict. It resolves nothing. All it does is further delay justice for all of those families that have disappeared and victims of the war on both sides. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gavin. And then we continue with speakers on behalf of political groups. And the first speaker is Mrs. Boriana Åberg, representing the EPP group from Sweden. The floor is yours.
Madam President, dear colleagues, a few days ago I received a video showing a horrible